All right. Thanks everyone for joining us on this recording. My name is Julia and I am a writing services coordinator in the Student Learning Commons, which is located in the library in Simon Fraser University. And Simon Fraser University is located, all of its campuses are located on unceded and occupied Indigenous territories. Here, I am in my office right now on the Burnaby Mountain campus of Simon Fraser University. And Burnaby Mountain is also known as Luchluchwetan in the Squamish language, the place of the ever-peeling arbutus tree. And that is a recognition of this place as shared territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Coquitlam First Nations. And in particular, a recognition of those nations' ongoing relationships with the trees and the growing living things that are part of this ecosystem and landscape, and not just the buildings that are part of this landscape. So I will introduce us to our first question, which is to ask all of our panelists to provide us with a brief introduction to themselves and tell us what multilingualism means to you. And you can think about this in your role as graduate students at SFU who speak, write, and think in multiple languages. And our first panelist to answer this question will be Shaila. So I will pass the virtual mic over to you, Shaila. And you're just muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. And yeah, thanks, Julia, for the question. It's a complex one. And thanks also for the opportunity to participate in this panel. So I am a PhD candidate in the Languages, Cultures, and Literatures program in the Faculty of Education. And my research is about the language learning and the settlement trajectory of adult migrants from minority ethnic and linguistic background. So you can see that the topic that we're talking about is kind of very close to my scholarship, and not just scholarship, my passion as well. So as a graduate student at SFU, the question is who speak, write, and think in multiple languages. My first language is not English. I come from Bangladesh, so Bangla is my first language. I also speak two other languages. English, I speak English as a second language, or as an additional language. But when it comes to what does multilingualism mean, so that kind of takes me back to my journey. Like the country that I come from is considered to be monolingual. Well, it is not, but is largely monolingual. So when we come to a context such as SFU, so from a monolingual person navigating a monolingual society, a seemingly monolingual society, again, it's not. Suddenly I become a multilingual person in a multilingual university. Now, whether this is an asset or this is something that I'm learning to navigate, that I think is an essential question. As a grad student who speak in multiple, who has multiple languages at her repertoire, I don't think that I speak or write in any other language other than English when I'm located within the context, within the university context, but I do think in other languages. And as a grad student, like I said, that I come from a specific region. So my ethnicity, my religion, my gender, I identify as a woman. So those are my identity constructs as well. But when we're talking about multilingualism, my only identity that I think it's highlighted is that I'm somebody who does not speak English as a first language, but rather the language is in my repertoire. But my other identities, my cultural and linguistic repertoire, are kind of, I feel, not at the forefront when I am talking about my multilingual identity. So multilingualism, what it means to me, it is not just about the ability or the number of languages that I speak. It's also about the context where I am situated. And here I want to quote Monica Heller. And also I would like to acknowledge that my understanding and my around these issues are informed by scholars such as Monica Heller, Kanagaraja, Baumert, Angel Lin, Ryoko Kubota, and many other scholars who are working in this discipline. and I'm particularly drawn toward the scholars of Global South. So I'm going to quote Monica Heller here, who said that individual's linguistic repertoire is tied to the position he or she has with respect to the arena. So again, it is not about my ability, rather it's about the situation that I'm in. It is about the context that again, in the words of Blomart et al., who says that it is not about what I have or what somebody else has. It is about the space that that organize the space that organizes, or the space that provides us agency or not, and the space that enables or disables multilingualism. So it's a complex process, and I don't see it only on me as a student who is multilingual and how I see it, but I am a part of the system. So I think we need to look at this phenomenon from a larger angle. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Shaila. I really appreciate you introducing the body of scholarship that exists around this, and also the complexity of the intersecting identities that are coming into play here. So wonderful introduction. Thank you. And I will pass it over to Junyi.
Receive virtual virtual microphone. Hi everyone, my name is Junyi. I use she, they pronoun, and I'm currently a third-year philosophy graduate student. Actually, like I'm working on my thesis, and my thesis is FASS has a best example, I think, in answering this question. So my thesis is about Buddhism philosophy, and what I do is to interrogate current popular English translations of some of Mahayana Buddhism. One of their favorite texts is called Lotus Sutra. So the English translations say most of them they translate from Chinese translations from Sanskrit. So there's some mistranslations from different languages, and based on those translations, there are like misinterpretations that like some scholars, when they're interpreting the text, because of English, the languages they use, they rely on, there are certain assumptions that if we don't put it together with another language, with another like cultural background, we cannot see the difference. So this is also provide me with an opportunity to use my language. I'm from China, speak Chinese. And although the text I need to use is like ancient Chinese, so I have to learn that language as well. So I have that, and it provides me with I'm glad that because of the fact that I'm a multilingual person, I'm able to look at the same thing, same issue, same tests from different contexts, different cultural and language contexts. And personally, I find that really interesting. And I just realized that I'm doing multilingualism in my thesis. Yeah. And besides that, I also want to like address like the other side of like being a multilingual speaker and studying at SFU. And as Shaila mentioned, this is quite tricky when it comes to like us as a population. We are like very multilingual, but when it comes to like our study, research, thesis, will come back down into academic English, and that was very, very challenging for me. And I guess maybe Shaila and Mia could also like maybe also felt the same way, is we have to learn English first, and then we have to learn academic English, which is really difficult. And also those languages, they're not just languages themselves. We have to learn their cultural background, and also the thinking process, like the perspectives behind them. And I found them very challenging. Although it's very interesting still to be able to see from different perspectives. But it's a learning process, and sometimes it's a little bit, for me, I find it difficult to balance like different the like part of my brain wants to think in Chinese, part of my brain wants to think in English, and it's just sometimes they fight with each other, but I have to give up certain things so that I can do like my thesis properly. So that's, yeah, I guess that could serve as an example just to show that like how complicated this issue could be, and also like how like it's everywhere. It's like within our like daily experiences and also like study experiences here. Thank you.
Thanks, Junyi. I appreciate the framing of the sort of simultaneously, it can be multilingualism could be very natural, like normative. It's just here, it's happening, and also there's a lot of tension potentially. Like you use the word fighting with each other, so there's also the challenges. So it's both and I really appreciate the presentation of that. And I love that you said I just realized that this is what I'm doing. So I'm glad that it's creating an opportunity for that self-reflection as well. Great. And now over to you, Mia. Virtual mic handed over.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Shaila, and Junyi that has, shared with us, really like, good, like, cool examples then that I really relate to. So yeah, hi everyone. My name's Mia. I use she, her pronouns, and I was born and raised in Vietnam for 18 years before I moved to Canada after high school for higher education. I'm currently an second year master's student in communication. I'm also a TA who have TA'd a couple of writing intensive CMNS courses over the past 1.5 years. And starting from last fall, I also started working at the Student Learning Commons as a graduate writing facilitator. And before I answer the question about like how multilingualism means to me as a graduate student, I also want to talk about how it used to mean for me as an undergraduate student, because I got to experience multilingualism like the most this first time during my undergrad program. So I started out as an undergraduate student at SFU in 2017, which was like a while ago. And that was like also my first time arrived in Canada, in a like an English native speaking country. Being an international student back then was quite challenging for me, with a lot of like language related pressures that I put on myself. And I feel like I had to put it on, to conform to the societal norms as I moved from like Vietnam to Canada. Um, there's a popular bilingual meme. Gia, would you mind like sharing that meme with us for now? Thank you. So there's a popular bilingual meme that says, where the word bilingual is pun as bilingual, B-I to B-Y-E, lingual, which makes fun of the fact that when a person speaks two languages, and they start to lose vocabularies in both languages. So I kind of felt something like this in undergrad, but more culturally, sometimes like I feel like I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't belong to Canada, I didn't belong to Vietnam, and I started feeling losing my identity in both cultures. Yeah, thank you, Julia. So, international students are, often required to, as Junyi mentioned earlier, we were required to take English tests and then submit this result to prove our English proficiency when we apply to study abroad, in English speaking countries. So in these tests, when we were to prepare the tests, we were told constantly that we had to use fancy jargon, vocabularies, and like complex, flawless grammars that, not even like native speakers use frequently in their life. Like, when I first came to Canada, like my friends were impressed with my grammar. My Canadian friends were impressed with my grammars because they didn't use that on a daily basis. So yeah, anyways, the experience studying for these tests left me this mentality that when I came here, I felt the pressure to learn like to use the language that the locals use, to learn slangs, to learn the ways the locals talked, to learn like how to like emphasize things, up and down, like the tonal English, and not just like speaking English, but like speaking the English that the native speakers speak. So like I always felt this pressure to fit in. I feel like also besides it being speaking Vietnamese as my mother tongue and not speaking English as my mother tongue, it's always also because of my ethnicity, as a non-white immigrant in Canada, that there was like constant need to fit in through my language and like through my how I do things, how I interact. Yeah, and even though like I learned English since 6 years old, like which is a very long time, the way I used English before coming to Canada was more Vietnamese. How we Vietnamese call it, it's Vilish. Like I was embarrassed of my accent. I was embarrassed of my foreign way of speaking English when I first came to Canada. And like that, it's definitely like, affected my self-confidence when I was here. However, multilingualism has changed its meaning to me as a graduate student. Actually, like, after a few years being in Canada, like over the years when I'm here, I'm I've gradually become more appreciated and connected to my cultural roots. Like, a lot of things happen, but that's the like the result that I've become um more connected and like more appreciated and more confident about my cultural roots. And speaking multiple languages is no longer a burden, but more like an opportunity for me. I'm no longer afraid of like having accents or like having grammatical errors when I speak. Like when I'm anxious, like you can hear my Vietnamese accents coming out like very obviously. And I'm just not afraid of that anymore. And I just like I cherish that. I respect that. And my friends, I think like having um like a strong support system in Canada is also like an important thing to that as well. Like my friends like how I say things in my village. Yeah, and the fact that I speak multiple languages is the more the point now, and not the accent or not the way how I speak. Yes, so speaking multiple languages has opened the door for me to richer perspectives. So in particular, speaking Vietnamese and experience Vietnamese culture have indeed inspired me my research thesis in Vietnamese queers of culture, which is called the Lotto Shows. I get to feel like because I know Vietnamese and I know English, so now I get to bring the Vietnamese media text on my Vietnamese side into academia, which is my English side, and work like constantly between the two languages. Like it's I think it's pretty cool, to be honest. Like just like Junyi talked about your when you talked about your thesis earlier. I think it's pretty cool, that you can like work between like two type of cultural texts like that. And I've also seen this in my other international colleagues as well. Like one of my bestie in the MA program, she's Pakistani, and she's her thesis looks into the intimacy with the Pakistani female relationships. or another colleagues who looks at Brazilian design education in comparison with English design educations. So I would say like now as a graduate student, multilingualism has, has become way more powerful and more, and like, it just feels more comfortable for me now. And I'm just very happy and grateful that I get now to embrace those different cultural aspects and linguistics aspect of my identity. And yeah, so that's me. And I think it's also a powerful tool for many other international graduate students as well. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing so generously about yourselves and your experiences. Mia, I don't know if you saw, but Junyi and I both clapped for you when you were talking about embracing your accent. I love hearing accented speech. I just find it so, it's like richer, right? So I find that really beautiful, and also recognize that it can totally be a journey to embrace all of ourselves and the way, especially as you said, in the pressures to conform. And so I also really appreciate, Mia, how your introduction opened up the recognition that there also isn't just one English. Like Englishes are multiple, and the way that we speak in English is so influenced and inflected by who we are and other languages that we speak, and all of our cultural and even, Shaila, as you were saying, our gendered identities as well. So much richness that you all already shared, and a lot of what you were all sharing was about identity and how much identity plays into this complex relationship with language and culture. And as another part of your identity, you are all graduate writing facilitators with the Student Learning Commons. So working as peer tutors with other students in their writing. And so kind of picking up on some of the threads that you were talking about, Mia, of how multilingualism has become empowering for you, but was not maybe always that way, especially when you were in your undergrad. I would like to ask you all, what does multilingualism mean to you as grad writing facilitators, as tutors? And are there practices, ways that you bring multilingualism into your writing tutoring, and in particular ways that might bring that sort of sense of empowerment that Mia was talking about forward? So Junyi, you can take the mic first on this one.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Mia and Shaila. So although Julia just ended your introduction with a very promising, empowering tone, but I am gonna start this question with a little bit more because it's, on the one hand, it's very empowering. On the other hand, it's also very challenging for me, especially for me, now I've been working as a writing facilitator for over a year now, but when I first got this job, first thing first, I didn't know I'm gonna get this job because I thought like my English is not great. It's not my native language, and I make grammar mistakes when I'm speaking, and it's just, I really appreciate that I got this opportunity, and I really love what I'm doing, what I do in this job. So thank you. Thank you, Julia. So there's that. And also, like when I first started doing consultations, I would feel really nervous when my students, when they are native English speakers, and I feel extremely nervous when I make it mistake when I'm speaking. I just feel because of their native speakers, and I don't speak great English, and then I'm supposed to wear sort of act as a tutor role, but can I really do that? Would they trust me, and what would they think of me? And it bothered me for quite some time, but it's a process, like what Mia just mentioned. Like right now, I'm more embracing this fact that I make mistakes. It's okay. It doesn't matter. What matters is, the communication, that we can be helpful without being grammarly like perfect, and that's very important. So there's that. And what else? So that's one part of it, what it means to me. And also sometimes when I have students like coming from some Asian countries, from China, from Vietnam, and some of them, they also surprised that when they know that I'm like Chinese, not Canadian born Chinese or anything, and they're like, wow, your English must be pretty good. I'm like, nah. I'm good at some of it, but like not like perfect English speaker or writer. And that's fine, because that's not the point. It's more about helping to, helping students to understand what those assignments want from them, and the writing those tips, strategies. And so it's less about language itself, it's more about the mindset, how you think behind your writings. So I also would like talk with my students about that. And I would also like in my works, I would also like encourage them. Sometimes I would have students, they're really nervous about speaking. But when we're doing the essay, we're reviewing their essay, sometimes I would suggest, like, let's do it this way. Like I read the first paragraph, then we stop and we talk about it. Then you can read the second paragraph if you feel comfortable, and then we can do it in read like just like that in turns. Yeah, so like most of the times, like I can see that from their facial expression, like they're a little bit nervous, but I am like just keep encouraging them, like, you're doing great. And I can feel that at the end of it, I think they find it a little bit like they feel good about it. And I'm really happy about that. And what else? Yeah, I guess another thing, this is also a tricky thing about how to like balance this multilingualism with the like academic English settings, because we have to write in certain ways to accommodate to the like assignment requirement. And sometimes that means that we have to sacrifice part of like like the multilingual part of ourselves, our own like languages and cultures and way of thinkings. And as a Chinese, I really relate to some of the Chinese students, like their way of thinking, why they write certain sentences in this way, because that's how our language works. And in Chinese, it makes perfect sense. In English, it's like, no, like your instructor would cry, you don't do that. But so I can perfectly understand why certain writings are in that way. And sometimes but there's nothing like much I can do about it. What I can do is just point it out that like this sentences, I see it makes perfect sense to me, and I know why you're writing this way, and I agree. But in order for us to to do better in this assignment, we have to twist a bit and try to make it more focused and more critical, and so that they would get a better grade, which is like a lot of students, or maybe also students, they care about. And yeah, I guess for them, and also for me, sometimes I would find it very challenging to balance this. On the one hand, I want to like promote like different languages, like different way of thinkings and different ways of writings. But on the other hand, I feel like, and also students feel like, sometimes it's quite sometimes it could be quite upsetting to me, because some students, they feel like they have to write in a certain way, and insofar that because the instructor asked to make no grammar mistakes, you have to write exactly 200 words. So sometimes they that made them feel like the language comes first, ideas and thinkings comes later. So they would rather take out brilliant ideas to make it fit into the word count. And I'm like, oh no, I think your ideas are great. But I can see like why they're doing what they're doing. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Junyi, for sharing all of that. For this question, the next respondent is Mia. So I'll hand it to you, Mia.
Thank you, Junyi and Julia. So I completely agree with Junyi when you mentioned that, like how you felt when you got this job. Same here. When I got this job, like, okay, the first emotion was definitely like, I was happy and over the moon that I got this job, but then I felt like an imposter. Like during the interview, I felt like I could do this job, but when I actually got the job, I felt like, how could I help other students with my non-native English? And it's like, it's not just like speaking, it's also writing. And like, I have to navigate my own writing, like, on a daily basis with my papers, with my thesis. And yeah, and then so when I got a job, I felt like, I doubt myself, like if I could really be helpful. But Julia you told me this, like you said that our ability to speak multiple languages was actually appreciated in this role. So, well, I doubted that at first, but then, when I actually met the students, look at their papers and then talk to them in the consultations, especially the students who also spoke English with an accent like me, or who also struggle with their papers with English academic writing, with the structures, English writing structures and standards, like just like me when I was in undergrad, actually just like me now. I that was when I understood my role better. So I think like this role, being someone who speaks multiple languages in this role is not just about like fixing the student papers, grammars, but we also like helping the student navigate their university journey in English as a foreigner and as a non-native speaker. I would say like our role was more like a peer to them. Like just like our writing and learning peers. We are also just a peers who actually do the same job as them. It's not that like, we are a grad student that makes any difference. And I like in my consultation with the students, I felt like my job was to like hold their hands and we walked through the paper together. We walked through like the assignment guideline together, and like trying to like figure out, it's like, oh, are we following that the guideline? Are we doing what the English academic writing is asking us to do? And then me, a non-native speaking English, helping another non-native speaking English navigate that English academic writing journey. And another thing about practicing multilingualism in my work is that it means for me to be open-minded to different ways of writing. So as also my writings also originate from Vietnamese writing style, I get to know like a non-English writing standard and be more understanding of the other approaches as well. And I think it's important to make the students understand that like there is no right or wrong way of writing. Like they are not wrong when they write in a certain ways. But it's just that we're here to help them have like a smoother transition to English academic writing and express their ideas. Yeah, so like I agree with Junyi earlier, like there, we have to compromise our cultural writing style when we hear and we to adhere to the English academic writing style. And it's just like in this process, these students have us as the peers to, go through that with them. And yeah, and besides that, because like we are also international students, like those experiences, I feel like come in handy in these situations, in these consultations, like where can I actually give like some useful tips for them? Like, use the grammar checker. It's free and it's helped us a lot, which is like little grammar errors that we can't really see. Or like little vocabularies errors or typos. Yeah. Yeah. So that's for me.
Awesome. Thank you both, Junyi and Mia. When I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about how like so much of the consultation experience and the role of grad facilitators is like about kind of framing what it means to write and to be a writer in this really big picture way beyond just language, like beyond just the words on the page, in this much bigger sense of what that means as part of our identity. So I really appreciate that. And I also want to share that I also felt like an imposter when I got the job as a grad writing facilitator. And English is my first language. I'm not monolingual. I also speak French, but so I think it's also just everybody feels a little bit like me, a writer. And I also recognize that there's different kinds of aspects and nuances to that experience as well. But just wanted to share that I was like, yes, me too. And Shaila, over to you for this question.
Thanks, Julia. And thank you so much, Junyi and Mia, for sharing your experiences and the stories. And I relate with everything that you said. And I really don't know if I can add anything new to what has already been said. But since there is a question, so here are my 2 cents. As a writing facilitator, like I said, a space, I think it's important to consider if a space is agentive or not. So the Student Learning Commons as a space, it does provide us the agency, kind of to feel empowered with all our identity constructs. But it also, we need to think about how does this play out in our role and in the larger picture. And I agree so much with Junyi and Mia, with you when you talked about the imposter syndrome, because I felt the same when I applied for it and when I got it. On one hand, there's like, as I know that I have the experience, I have been teaching language for so many years, I know how to do it, but at the same time, okay, maybe I'm not the right fit in this space. There is that. And then Mia said something about always trying to be someone else to try to fit in, so that kind of pressure. So putting everything together, what comes out is that we are talking about multilingualism at the backdrop of the standard language ideology of English, standard language, standard English ideology. So when we talk about multilingualism with the backdrop of a standard language, or how we should be speaking, then there obviously a power dynamics, a power hierarchy that even if we want to, we cannot ignore, we cannot be in denial. So multilingualism, again, talking about the space, is it practiced in the private space? Is it practiced in the public space? These are some quintessential questions. So yes, I'm multilingual and I speak multiple languages and my home, and that's that I celebrate, fine. But then what is the currency of this multilingualism when I bring it to my workplace, or when I bring it to the bigger picture, when I bring it to academia? And as writing facilitators, again, yes, we do celebrate multilingualism, but at the end of the day, how much of it can we incorporate into academic writing? These are big questions. Also, just like Junyi and Mia, you said, I think I really think that I don't have much to add in this to this question, but I also see my role as somebody who can connect better with the students just because of the shared background and lived experiences, for the similarities in the journey, perhaps. But at the same time, when it comes to academic writing, so we do need to tell the students at the end of the day that yes, what you're doing is fine, it's a style, but now you have to switch to another style, which is the convention, the one that is acceptable. So obviously this space that your style is completely fine, but does it have space in here? No, it doesn't. So now switch to another style. That's something that you need to learn. And even and education is not separated from the larger society. So even if we celebrate multilingualism within the university context, I don't want to say academic context, but within the university context, for students, how much currency do they have once they graduate, once they enter the life outside of the university? How much space do we have for multilingualism? Maybe in some areas, yes, there is, but how much exactly? And how empowering is that? So these are some questions that I grapple with. Also, some the fear of dealing with native students, and I look at it differently. That yes, the fear is there, but also as a non-native English speaker, how many native students come to me for writing advice? That is also something that I often wonder. I don't know I don't know, like if you regularly have native students who come to you for consultations or something, but personally, I don't have, which is okay. I like to help out students, and by here I help, I do not mean I'm doing a favor to other students, but which I'm perfectly fine with connecting students who do not speak English as the first language, but then I position myself as English, academic English is everybody's second language, a language that we all have to learn. But in given by, if we go by that philosophy, then how many native students do come to SLC for help with their writing? And if the percentage is at the lower end, then why? So I think the power dynamics, the hierarchy of the languages, and when we do talk about multilingualism, we celebrate it, but we always talk about it at the backdrop of a standard English language. I think that is really out there even today. So these are it's not a very clear answer to what you asked, Julia, but I think these are the questions that I have.
Sorry, can I respond to Shaila before we wrap this up?
Yeah.
I agree so much with you, Shaila. Like how we wanted to celebrate multilingualism and help the students with our own similar backgrounds. But in the end of the day, in the end of the consultations, we're still together with the students, we're still navigating one approach of writing, one of style of writing, and in these consultations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate the framing around power and the recognition of just the I think about this a lot, like the kind of concentric circles or whatever of power in the institution, and recognizing that in the student learning commons, we have some aspect of power in the conversation, but we don't influence the assignment guidelines, we don't influence the grading. And so when students are, and Junyi, you were talking about this as well, and actually all of you touched on this, that when students come to us and we're not influencing those aspects of the conversation, then there's only so much we can do. And we're often kind of, if we're doing anything, we're encouraging the student to kind of negotiate from their own position, but their own position is not the power position in the class. And so it's a very complicated question that I asked you. So it makes total sense that you had questions, more questions than answers. All right, so for the next question, is there a story or a moment from your own lived experience that you're willing to share that you think can offer us an insight into what it means to truly celebrate linguistic diversity? So Shaila, you were talking about this sort of maybe a challenge of celebration. So what does it truly mean to celebrate linguistic diversity at SFU, if you have a story to share? So Mia, I will ask you to speak on this one first.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, so from what Shaila shared with us earlier, there's definitely very little room of flexibility, very little space for us to practice multilingualism within SFU, as this is like an English speaking institutions in an English speaking country, right? So like my negotiation, my resistance to that is really small, but I think it's something. It's using the original words of the language, you know, in our papers, in our works, rather than trying to translate things to English. So yeah, that's definitely my favorite thing to do. And to celebrate multilingualism and to celebrate my culture as well. So as my research, as mentioned earlier, my research focuses on Vietnamese queer culture. So in my works, like there are a lot of like Vietnamese words that I enjoy using as they are in my writing. I translated once for the English readers when I first mentioned it in my works, but then I would just continue to use the Vietnamese words in that. And I also enjoy reading, like, encountering these in the wild as well. When I mention in the wild, like, I mean, like, just like the students' works that I've got the chance to read. So one particular example was a student work in that got submitted to our SOC writing contest last year, and this paper looks at the gentrification of the Hong Kong food scene, in which the student used Cantonese words like chan tan, that means Hong Kong local diners or cafes, and bing suits, that means ice rooms. So yeah, so like I had a really good time like reading this paper, and I actually like, went to Google and down rabbit hole, just like, going from there and then learn a bunch of like, Hong Kong was like that. And I feel like, getting to read these papers and getting to practice this is like our little resistance to the dominant the dominant writing style in English, as well as like the little celebration, yeah, to the little celebration in our works to celebrate multilingualism and our cultures. Since like, we already have to adhere to the English writing standards, like, how is we structure our paper, how we have to present things in some particular ways, or like the kind of language that we have to use, like, formal, no romantic, no non-emotive type of languages. So just to keep out all words like that in academia, I think it's really empowering and it's fun too, and I know, as someone who doesn't speak a certain language, you you also get to learn that little words when you read someone else's papers as well. So yeah, so that's why I enjoy doing that myself, and I enjoy reading that from other people's works as well. Thank you.
I totally agree. And it was making me think about Joshua Whitehead's recent book, Making Love with the Land. There's one chapter where he writes in creased syllabics, any word that has to do with his body, only in creased syllabics, doesn't translate it. So you just have to read and figure it out or not figure it out. And I heard him, sorry, I know I'm not supposed to be on the panel, but I just have to share this. I heard him speak about the book, and somebody asked him about that choice, and he was talking about how people are not entitled to easy access to his body. So that's why he made that choice. And I was just like, it's so powerful to think about that, like how language can operate on all these different levels when we make space for it. So I just wanted to share, even though I'm not on the panel. Sorry, thank you. Okay, and over to you, Junyi.
Right, thank you, Julia and Mia. So alongside what Mia have already mentioned, I think for me, what it means to truly celebrate linguistic diversity at SFU. It's more like I think about celebrating it as a process, and because of all the difficulties and challenges and like structural problems and institutional and power dynamics, as Shaila and Maya mentioned. So I think for now I'm at the very beginning part. It's like to recognize that we have this rich linguistic and like diversities here. So I think that, at least for me, from my personal experience, that makes me feel more comfortable and help me to feel proud of my own language, and help me to feel proud of, like Mia said, like my accent. Actually, to be honest, I'm still quite kind of nervous with my accent, but I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with that. So like, our department is like very, like we have students from like different countries and speak different languages. And I find it like this sort of setting makes us feel more comfortable to, talk and discuss and share experiences with each other. It's like sort of just like what Shaila, Mia, and me are doing here, because we experience the same difficulties and challenges. We are more understanding, and we are more like we can relate to each other, and that is like that benefits everyone in the sense that we all recognize like we have this, like those actual languages aside from academic English, and they can bring into different insights on the same issues. And I remember, I personally myself is not in that seminar, but my supervisor, he was holding a seminar about, again, another Buddhist test, and he invited all the students in his class to for every chapter they read, he encouraged students to bring like a translation from their own language. So we have Turkish translation, we have Chinese translation, we have what else? French, and we have German, and different translations, put them together and to see like how different languages and different cultures interpret the same thing in like super different ways, and usually the differences are tied back to their like language and cultural background, and it's really helpful to bring that insight into this academic setting. But so I think that's a really great example. But other than that, like personally, I find it quite challenging to really celebrate it. Like it's like celebrate, yay! Like we'd love to do that, but it's just we're in this institution, we're gonna like academia, and we're gonna follow its rules. And like I think it was Shaila or Mia mentioned, like it's not just about academia or SFU, it's about the broader social settings. And so personally, I find it quite challenging I think we're not there yet. Hopefully, like after how many years, and we can achieve that. But for now, my little effort is just to recognize it and share this power with other students. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Junyi. I feel like the sort of complexifying of the idea of celebration, because to me, this conversation, even though it's maybe challenging and maybe not like a rah celebration, but just hearing all of you, for me, it's a privilege to hear all of you. And I hope that it's like maybe some kind of celebration to connect with each other. So yes, appreciate that. And Shaila, you have the last word on this one.
Yeah, well, again, thanks, Mia and Julie, for sharing experiences, and Julia, what you said as well. So, yeah, I think I will echo you. again, multilingualism or linguistic diversity is still in a very private space. Like I can give you an example. I'll give you two examples. One is my own, another is mine as well, but it's related to a student that I taught in one of the courses. So my background is in language, and I've been teaching language for many years now. So when I try to look for jobs, for English teaching jobs, because we need to think about our survival as well as grad students. Okay, so to be an English language teacher, you have to be a native speaker. That's what the job posting says. And I'm not a native speaker. So in terms of when we think about linguistic diversity, and like just what Junyi, you said that about, academia, education institutions, and the larger society, where do we bring in linguistic diversity to celebrate it in the true sense? Another example that I had with one of my students was, I think I mentioned this before in another conversation, was that I had, I was teaching a course. It was not a writing course, it was a content theory course. And I had this wonderful paper from one of my students, an outstanding paper, which was not written in academic English. Since we're talking about linguistic diversity as writing facilitators. So my conversation, my points always go back to writing, what kind of space we can make in academic writing to celebrate linguistic diversity. So, and I have this outstanding paper from the student, critical insights and observations and, like very convincing arguments, but the paper does not follow academic writing style or academic English conventions. As an instructor, I had many choices, and then this was a negotiation with myself that how do I approach this student's paper? I loved that student. She was very engaging, participating, and she had super ideas that she always used to share in the class. And then this paper that I had, and I was like, I'm going to give her, of course, a very good grade because this paper even exceeded my expectations. But what should I tell the students about not following the academic writing conventions? Should I tell her this may demoralize? Should I not tell her that would be a disservice because she may end up in other courses where they would expect her to follow academic conventions? In my case, I was like, I'm not teaching writing. Should I go into that space? Should I bring it up? Or should I just let it go? Because the student clearly deserves this. And I had no problem understanding her paper, even though it did not have a traditional thesis statement and topic sentences. That was a space that I found myself in. At that point, I thought that maybe I should just tell her that I love your paper, it's brilliant, but there is something called academic English. And if you want to learn more, we can have a discussion. And then I don't know if that was the right approach to go to, but I also think that it depends a lot on the relationship that we have with her students. And in that particular situation, I felt that I could bring it up to the student without coming from as best as I could, trying to come from not from a power of position, not to judge her, but that is not always possible. So, and in my capacity as an instructor, I could make that decision of not, overlooking that this paper does not have academic writing conventions. But if I was a TA, I don't think I could have done that. If the student brought this paper to SLC to me, in my capacity as a grad writing facilitator, I'd have told the student that you have a brilliant paper, but your professor is going to pick up these things because you don't have a thesis, you don't have a topic. So, kind of bring those in your papers, customize your paper according to these conventions. Considering all this, that in academic writing, we still do not have that space as much as we talk about linguistic diversity and then how empowering it is. Probably we still have a very long way to go until there is a solid space that is created within academia, within academic writing, for these non-conventions, let's say. I don't know if we call them non-conventions, for the conventions from other languages. And there are scholars who are working in this area as well. So there are scholars who are promoting plurilingualism, translanguaging, but I do think that the conversation has just started. Yes, it has come way, but it has a very long way to go yet. And we need to keep on discussing these issues. We need to keep on trying to, there is an epistemic shift that is now required to make space for other types of writing styles, the styles probably from the global south. And we do need to have that conversation so that we can make this space. It's going to take a long time. We're nowhere near there, but the conversation has started. That's a bright side. I don't know if I'm going to see changes in my lifetime, but I'm hopeful. Probably one day it will be possible, but I think it's very important to keep the conversation going and to keep pushing. Yeah, that's all.
I'm just chuckling. That's all, because that's a lot. That's fantastic. Shaila, thank you. And yeah, absolutely hear everything that you're saying and really agree. And I feel like you already kind of anticipated this next question, which is what's your call to action or a challenge that you want to share for SFU during this multilingual week, because it's multilingual week right now at SFU. And I heard a call to action from you already about opening space and keeping the conversation going. But Shaila, if you have anything you want to add to that, please feel free. And if you feel like you've already dropped the mic, that's great. And we can hand it to Mia. So over to you.
Well, Julia, thanks. And you're right that I have already kind of covered that part where I want this discussion to go. Yeah, so I think that I said this, an epistemic shift is really very important. And as a person from the global south and as in the different hats that I wear, I also think that it is important that we kind of promote this critical discussion with our students as well. And that I think is also going to bring in changes in a positive way, in a transforming way about the future that we are trying to hope for.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely agree that we need to have the conversation everywhere. So thank you, Shaila. And Mia, what's your call to action or the challenge that you want to issue for this closing?
From Shaila's brilliant example, it's also related to what I want to suggest as well. I feel like pushing the conversation is definitely like something we need to do, but also like we need something like, tangible as well, like something like we can ask the school to do. And from Shaila's example, I feel like as a TA myself, I want to have some like, concrete training or like concrete conversations, concrete discussions, someone's talking about this issue, like as a TA, when we encounter like these papers, like how should we handle that? Yeah, so my call to actions was to hold, conversations with outcomes with like training materials for TAs to navigate through these situations. Like how strict are we talking about when we are, when we want to hold the students' papers to English academic writing standard? How strict are we to that? And then how strict are we, balancing that with how good the content and then how good the ideas of the students are in the paper? Because yeah, so I also found myself have to drop some points for students, or like talk to the student about their papers, how they format the papers, how like the elements in their papers that they are missing according to the English writing standard. And like sometimes just as Shaila students, I also encounter some papers that are good on the idea side, but yeah, like I was also like uncertain how I should navigate that. Yeah, so to sum up, my call to action would be training for TAs to navigate multilingualism in their tutorials, in their class, and with their students. Because TAs are, I believe TAs are people who interact with students like the most at school, and way more than the instructors. and they need to have, more concrete training to navigate these situations.
Thanks. Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking about, and that's why I popped off the frame because I grabbed this Elements of Indigenous Style by Dr. Gregory Younging. And so obviously this is thinking about Indigenous writing, but one of the things that I've found so empowering about it is that the first principle in here, I think it's the first or the second, I can't remember, but it's when Indigenous style conflicts with house style, that Indigenous style takes priority. And I feel like in some ways what I'm hearing from you, both of you, is like we almost need like an Elements of Multilingual Style or something that we can then like refer back to and be able to say, okay, well, I see these assignment guidelines, but I also see this other input. And like you said, Shaila, there are definitely people who are scholars who are doing this work and who are pushing this conversation. And so being able to reference them, I find so like that speak back in the language of scholarship to scholars, I think can be so helpful. So maybe this is something that we can all also talk about, like for TATM Day, to bring in. I saw all you nod, so we can keep talking about that, and that'd be fantastic. And then of course we can also talk about it for the SLC.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Julia. 'Cause I've seen, I think like I think in one of like the undergraduate classes, the students got a paper on Indigenous learning and teaching style that I read a lot in a lot of papers. That's I got to feed and I commented on from right away. And I was just wondering, like, this, why don't TAs have, these materials in their training? Yeah. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, it's a great question. Another part of the call to action. And so over to you, Junyi. Last call to action for us.
Last call to action. Yeah, just added on to all that. I think practically speaking, like if we want TAs to have this training, like we have to start the conversation with the instructors first. Yeah, and I think Julia maybe mentioned this before in our meetings or something. Like maybe we could like somehow through the library resources or something, we can like invite instructors to like we can do a workshop or something just to like learn from their perspectives, like how they think about it, and if it's possible to integrate these into their classes, into their grading systems, rubrics. And I think that's a little thing that we might actually be able to do and make some changes like into students' writings. So I think that's an idea I would be really interested to work on, and if we're gonna do a workshop, I'm definitely like I'm here. Yeah, so and adding on to that, so I'm currently a TA, and in our like I am TAing for 100 writing classes for philosophy. And basically like during our TA meetings, we have this consensus that of course you need topic sentences and that. But like in terms of grammar, the writing part of the rubric is like really small. It's like 3% or something. And I would directly talk to my student. It's like, it's okay as long as like I can understand your ideas, then it's great as long as you show me that you have this effort. Like you don't have to write beautiful, like perfect English. It's not the point. I want to see your ideas. It's okay for you to make mistakes. And yeah, I think that like that helps, especially for some non-native speakers, writers, help them to feel better because they don't have to be so worried about, I'm gonna make a grammar mistake and gonna lose point for that. And so I think that's what I've and also other TAs been doing for this course. And not sure, maybe we could also like, since we already mentioned this TATM day, and that could also be part of it, part of the discussion, because from my consultation experiences, I know that like some TAs or instructors, they are really strict about grammar and about word count. And it's like all or nothing. If you make a grammar mistake in like, if I can't read this, if you don't use a native phrase, you use something else, it means the same thing. But if you don't use native English, then you're not, then I don't accept that. And that's really frustrating for me. And yeah, so all in all, like we really need to like in actual like our like learning, studying experience, working experience here, like I think we can like really start. It would be really helpful if we can actually start a conversation with those, TAs and instructors, like because we are all involved in this system in terms of, guiding and grading students in terms of how they write. So it's very important.
Thank you, Junyi. And I think one of the things that I am hearing in what you're saying too is that because students have had sometimes students have had those experiences of an instructor who is really strict and who is really counting every grammar error or whatever, that if another instructor is just kind of silent on it, then the student is still carrying that with them. They're still concerned. So we actually have to be proactive in saying how we are approaching it, and not just assuming that the student knows that we're not counting every grammar error and that that's not how we're approaching it, because otherwise we always carry all of our experiences with us, and so many of us have had harm done to us in the feedback that we've gotten on our writing and on our language. So we have to be taking that really proactive approach, I think, across the university. So I'm excited to continue that work with you all, and I'm so deeply grateful to all three of you for sharing so vulnerably and generously of your experiences and your insights and your research and your calls to action. So thank you, and I look forward to sharing this more widely. So I will end the recorded part of the discussion. So thanks, everyone.